So I was always an idiotic, stupid dog, and we watched certain comedical things. We try to get into comedy ourselves, but instead of saying it's comedy, it's comedy. Comedy means something different. It's an emotional thing that means reaching out to two people, and it's supposed to be that you're being nice, but comedy is supposed to be like you're trying to be nice to somebody, but comedy is like you're trying to make somebody laugh. And typically, the easiest way to make somebody laugh is by making fun of someone else's misfortune. Like when the man was just a little boy, and I wasn't even in existence yet, but I could look in my dog remembrance and see the man's dad had driven down to the local candy store to get the family some pops, and the man and his mom, and we never talk about the mom very much, and we're not going to get into why, it's a whole thing, but the man's dad was driving the family car, and the man was in the back seat, and as a puppy, in my dog remembrance, I wasn't alive yet, but I could see it in my dog remembrance. And if you need to know what dog remembrance is, dog remembrance has been spelled out many times. You could go back and look. It's never really it got its own take where you could look it up. Maybe one or two out of 1,000 takes it was, but it's in like 300 of the takes we mentioned, 304 of the takes we mentioned dog remembrance. Dog remembrance is the ethereal cloud that floats above the whole canine species. It's a cloud just like man invented in like the 2000s, the cloud storage, but the canines had a cloud that they could access and go back in time even before they were born and access memories. They're foggy memories. You can never really see very clearly, but in some canines could go back 100 years. Myself, I could go back 400, 500, 600 years. The further you go back, the foggier it is. But when I was viewing the man in that family car, I think it was a Plymouth. I don't know why they would have a Plymouth if they're rich elitists, but it was a big, ginormous car. It was olive green, like it was a general's car from the army. And the man was sitting in the back seat, and as an unborn puppy, I was sitting there next to him in my dog remembrance viewing this whole thing, and the man's dad was sitting in the front seat, and his mom was sitting in the passenger seat. His mom we never mentioned. I don't know what was going on with that mom, why we never mentioned her. Something's weird. Like we hardly ever mentioned the cat, we never mentioned the mom. Anyways, so the man threw a gum wrapper out of the window once he got back in the car after he got all the families a Coke, and he got the man, he was a little boy then, sitting in the back seat. He got him a Buster Brown. A Buster Brown was vanilla ice cream at the bottom of a cup, a paper cup, and had Hershey's chocolate syrup and peanuts sprinkled over it, then a scoop of vanilla ice cream with a bunch of marshmallow topping over it and a few cherries. The Buster Brown was the greatest thing they ever invented, believe me. And I know that from my dog remembrance. But the man, he started digging into his Buster Brown. He watched it was Wrigley Spearmint Gum. The man's dad threw it right out the window of the Plymouth. And the man was like, "Hey, Dad, what you doing?" He goes, "Oh, what?" The man was like, "Hey, Dad, what you doing? I mean, you're littering?" And the man's dad was like, "Oh, you know what? They pay people to clean that up, so by throwing that out the window, I keep them working that way." And in my dog remembrance, I was like, oh my God, it was like a bad dream. It was like a nightmare. I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe that dad just sold him on this bunch of crapola, that he would pretend that was right and that's what he should have, the answer that he gave was not a good answer. He should never gave that answer. Then all of a sudden, this kid goes driving by on his bicycle, and just to try to change the subject, the man's dad says, "Holy shit, that's an ugly kid." And the kid looked in the window like, "Oh my God, I know I'm ugly. Why would you say that?" So I could hear you. And everybody in the car, the mom and the man and were aghast, and me in my phototronic or photonic, my what do you call it when they have like a thing? It's like an ethereal vision. It's like I forget what they call it. Like you're not really there. It's like a thing. I don't know what they call it. But I was there, but I wasn't there because I was in my dog remembers. But I could see that boy whip his head over and look at the man's dad. And I was like, why would you say that? And I was like, oh my God, why would you say that? He was so cruel. He didn't care. It didn't matter to him. The man's dad was one of those guys that's like, hey, it doesn't matter if you don't understand why I did what I did. I know what I did. And I was just wondering, I was like, oh my gosh, if you go back in time and you see those kind of cruelties and you see those kind of excuses, and that the man's dad would throw his Wrigley spearmint gum wrapper right out on the ground like a litter bug, and the little boy would call him on it. And instead of saying, oh, you're right, son, I shouldn't have done it, he says, they pay people. There's people who sweep the streets, and if you don't throw your gum wrappers out, they don't got no work. They'll lose their jobs, like he was a royalty, like a king or somebody, Like he's like, we got to have some servants. Don't worry about it, son. But anyways, then when that kid goes by and he tries to change the subject, he says, God, that's an ugly kid, right where the kid could hear it. I don't think the man's dad was trying to let that kid hear it, but that kid heard it. It was so cruel. Everything was so crazy. But that's just, when you're thinking about things like this, you delve back in your dog remembrance and you remember these things, you can't ever tie it back to the beginning because you get lost in your trains of thought and it doesn't even matter. But I was just thinking, whatever, the seasons change, life goes on. Sometimes you get these bumps in the road. Sometimes you get these pitfalls. Sometimes there's some cruelties and they're forgiven or they're forgotten or they're not. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't, believe me, it does not matter.